Every hunting band, in every era, in every corner of the ancient world, seems to have had one. The person who saw the herd differently than everyone else, who talked to the fire a little too long, who noticed the shape of clouds, or the migration of birds, or the way certain plants only bloomed after certain storms. Details nobody else in the group seemed to care about. In a species built entirely around fitting in to survive, what happened to the one person who never quite did? The answer isn't as grim as you might expect. Ancient societies didn't just tolerate the odd one out. In many well-documented cases, they built entire roles around them. Start with the obvious tension. Humans are an intensely social species, and for most of our history, blending into the group wasn't a personality preference, it was survival. A person who thought differently, acted differently, or simply didn't move through the world the way everyone else did risked standing out in a species where standing out could mean exclusion, and exclusion could mean death. So why didn't every weird ancestor simply get filtered out by evolution long ago? Because difference, it turns out, was often useful, extremely useful. Anthropological research into small-scale traditional societies, one of the closest living windows we have into ancient social structures, repeatedly finds the same pattern. The person who didn't fit the standard mold of hunter, gatherer, or warrior was frequently redirected, not rejected. A person who struggled with group hunts but noticed subtle changes in weather patterns might become the one who timed the harvest. A person who found large social gatherings overwhelming might become the toolmaker, working alone for hours, with a level of focus others didn't have the patience for. The tribe didn't need everyone to be good at the same thing. It needed everyone to be good at something. This wasn't charity, it was efficiency. A group that could sort its weird members into specialized roles ended up with a wider set of skills than a group that forced everyone into identical roles, and simply discarded whoever didn't fit. Some of the clearest evidence for this comes from the role of the shaman, healer, or spiritual specialist, a figure found across an extraordinarily wide range of ancient and traditional cultures, with no contact with one another. Anthropologists have long noted that these figures were often, specifically, the ones who didn't fit in as children, the ones prone to unusual behavior, intense solitary focus, vivid inner experiences, or a personality that simply didn't match the tribe's default expectations. Rather than being pushed to the margins, this kind of person was frequently pulled toward the center, trained, mentored, and eventually given one of the most socially significant roles a community could offer. The very traits that made them stand out, as children, were reframed as adults, as a source of insight the rest of the group didn't have access to. Storytellers and keepers of oral history followed a similar pattern. Every tribe needed someone who could remember genealogies, migration routes, seasonal cycles, the location of dangerous terrain, the outcomes of old conflicts, across decades, sometimes generations, without writing anything down. This wasn't a skill everyone had, and it often fell to individuals whose minds simply worked differently. Unusually detailed memories, a fixation on pattern and repetition, or a comfort with long solitary hours of practice that most of the tribe didn't share. The community didn't just accommodate this difference. It depended on it. Losing the weird one who remembered everything could mean losing the tribe's entire accumulated knowledge in a single generation. Even outside of specialized roles, ancient communities developed social customs that seemed specifically designed to make room for people who didn't fit the standard mold. Anthropological accounts describe flexible expectations around marriage, work, and daily participation for individuals who were understood, in the language of the time, to simply be built differently. Customs that allowed a person to contribute meaningfully to the group without being forced through the same social pathway as everyone else. This mattered enormously in small, close-knit communities where every member's ongoing presence and contribution was necessary for the whole group's survival. A tribe that had no place for its unusual members was a tribe that lost their skills, their knowledge, and their labor entirely. A tribe that found a place for them kept all three. None of this means ancient life was free of exclusion. Difference could and sometimes did lead to suspicion, isolation, or worse, particularly when resources were scarce or when a group was under outside threat and had less tolerance for anything that looked like deviation. The picture anthropologists have pieced together isn't one of universal acceptance. It's one of remarkable, and often surprising, adaptability, a pattern where small-scale societies frequently found practical uses for the very people who didn't fit the mold, because a tribe that could absorb and use difference was, in the long run, a tribe with better odds of survival than one that couldn't. Trace it back far enough, and the story of the ancient Weird One isn't really a story about tolerance in the modern sense. It's a story about function. Ancient communities weren't necessarily kinder or more open-minded than we assume. They were practical. And practicality, again and again, pointed toward the same conclusion. A group that made room for its unusual members ended up with skills, knowledge, and insight that a more rigidly uniform group simply didn't have. The sense of not quite fitting in, of seeing the world a little differently than everyone else around you, isn't a modern problem, and it isn't a flaw evolution somehow failed to sand down. It's something ancient societies encountered constantly, and something many of them learned, out of necessity, to put to remarkably